Deloitte's The Insight Track is developed to prep you and your organization for the ever-changing future. It provides insights into the agility you'll need to do sustainable business. This podcast series dives into the 6 agility domains necessary for Belgian companies to stand up to future crises. Please welcome our Inside Track host, Gudule Wijnands, Director of Deloitte Belgium.
The collaboration within a company is increasing when you involve the entire company in your supply chain. And due to some disruptive events the past years, we saw that you also need to extend that collaboration beyond your company boundaries if you want to become an agile company. In order to increase the value of your end-to-end supply chain, your suppliers, your partners, logistic providers also need to be involved. And companies really need to make a shift towards not only monitoring their own operations, but also those of their direct suppliers, for example. Collaboration, transparency, and trust within your whole supply chain are really the key to success. Today, we would like to discuss the network economy, what it was before, why it should change, and also some tips and tricks how you can achieve the best results. I've invited today 3 specialists on this Inside Track. Let them give a little moment to introduce themselves.
Thank you for having us here today, Gudule. I am Pierre Laurent. I'm a director in the SAP supply chain team, and I'm leading the team of Sapariba Expert. I'm managing key source-to-pay transformation program across multiple industries, and I'm working with our clients to help them improve the efficiency and effectiveness in their sourcing and procurement processes, but also their IT landscape.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Stéphanie Nougem. I'm a senior manager within our SAP supply chain team. I manage source-to-pay transformations, so a little bit in the same space as Pierre, and I work really hand-in-hand with the IT, procurement, supply chain, and finance departments to make these transformations a success.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Christophe Persons. I'm a director in the sourcing and procurement team. I actually sit more on the advisory side, where I help clients mainly in financial services and life sciences in sourcing and procurement topics like sourcing and cost reduction. We do a lot of operating model transformations as well. But then recent years, a lot of demand is there on digital transformations. That means how to approach it, how to build your roadmap, how to build a business case, what is the tool that I am needing, and how can I best implement it. So that's where we support.
Okay, thank you all. I propose we directly dive into the topics. What are today the major trends in procurement, and what are kind of the priorities of our current Chief Procurement Officer?
Well, we observe many trends within the sourcing and procurement sphere, alongside the old trends covering cost management, category management, how to organize efficiently a sourcing and procurement organization centrally versus decentrally. All those topics are still very important today, but we see that what keeps our CFOs, chief financial officers, and the CPOs awake at night today are more around risk management. For one key trend, how to manage the risk within our suppliers and supply chain, how to evaluate and what criteria to use, how frequently to evaluate those risks, and what to do as soon as a risk is identified and quantified. That's one key topic that comes back today. The second one would be around sustainability, looking at how we can enforce a sustainable procurement policy. How can we work with more eco-friendly suppliers? How can we use more eco-friendly products? And how can we measure our CO2 footprint within our organization, but also within our supply chain? That's the second topic. The third one is about digitalization. We see, of course, that has been there for a while, but it's further pushed today. How do we make sure we have a coherent set of systems and solutions that speak to each other and that allows the users to have the right data to take and the right information to take the decision when they need. And then the last trend that we see more and more is all about collaboration within the organization. How do we make sure that procurement involves the right stakeholders internally in the decision-making process, in their sourcing events, for instance? And it could be sustainability expert, it could be the legal team, could be the engineering team, whoever within the organization. But also what we see more and more is how can we make sure that we involve other people outside our organization, from our supplier base, from our partners, logistic providers, really looking at end-to-end supply chain.
Okay, so talking about procurement 2.0, do you see any shift in the vision of a CPO today? And if you do so, is it applicable in every industry, or do we see also a difference over there?
Yes, we see a shift, and I'm sure my colleagues Stephanie and Christophe will show some example from our project and from what we see at our clients. But we see a strong shift in mindset. If we take only the last trend that I was speaking about that collaboration, making sure that you collaborate outside of your organization with your partners, with your suppliers, and that has been reinforced by the worldwide crisis that we went through with the COVID-19, and where organization understand, of course, that it's important to connect with your suppliers to better plan and better work in collaboration with their partners. There are, of course, different level of maturity across industries, and not all industries are at the same level. If you compare an automotive industry where they are really vertically integrated versus a public sector or a bank where it's much less. However, we see that today there is no business is an island. Wherever you sit in any industry, any place in the world, you need your suppliers, you need your partners, you need to collaborate. So we see that it's a really important topic for all industry, and sometimes it's also pushed by local laws, as we see in Germany. There's the Supply Chain Act, which forces, so the government forces the organization to monitor internally what are their operations on a social and environmental aspect, but they also force those companies to look at their suppliers, their direct suppliers. And to do that, you need the transparency, you need the collaboration with your partners in the end-to-end supply chain.
So what are then, according to you, the key success factors to collaborate with your suppliers, for example, in that kind of network economy? And is there a big tip or trick to make that shift as a company?
Well, there are many factors to take into account. Of course, I'll just highlight three. The first one is the digital component. If you don't have a solution that allows your stakeholders to speak to each other and to connect digitally to the partners, that wouldn't work. Next to that, I think it's important to look at the standardization and look at what exists on the market today. There is no need to recreate a network that already exists. Your suppliers already are connected with other clients on networks that exist today, like the Paribas network, for instance. Let's make sure that we use those standard network. And the last important point for success in your transformation, it's to look at your partners, your suppliers, and make sure you embark them on your transformation. It's good to implement a solution, but if you don't have your partner with you, that will never work.
Yeah, of course. It all sounds very nice, but let's talk about some concrete examples, I propose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this collaboration shift really happening on direct and indirect processes, right, across the board in procurement. In the direct space, what we really see is a shift of reactive procurement into a more proactive procurement, where really you see on the planning side, on the execution side, really having the integration with your suppliers to exchange information. So for example, on the planning side, you will see buying companies sharing their forecasts on the network, on a collaborative platform, where suppliers will respond, commit to these forecasts. On the execution side, of course, we talk about purchase orders, invoices, really having that back and forth. Consignment stock visibility, for example, these are the things that really buying and supplying companies want to be able to share so that both have a win-win platform and both get really an outcome with such tool. In the indirect procurement space, what we see more and more is that buying companies put in place list of items that are negotiated with suppliers that are materialized via e-catalogs, right? So catalogs that are maintained by suppliers that are on the platform that they can really, across the board, if they have multiple customers that have the same platform, they can reuse these catalogs, change, of course, the prices or the items as needed, but they are able to work in a standard way on these platforms with these e-catalogs. We see that most customers in the indirect spend zone can have up to 60% of their spend covered by catalogs. And this is a huge shift of really shifting into a strategic procurement rather than operational procurement, of really pushing that maintenance where the suppliers see the benefits also to maintain it on their side. And then your buying organization really can concentrate on the proactive strategic procurement side of things. You also have the tail spend. That is an interesting topic to look at when we talk about indirect spend. The tail spend is also a bit of a blurry zone as to spending a lot of efforts to manage a very small amount of categories, but with many suppliers. And there we see on these collaborative platforms that marketplaces are being put in place in standard and enabled, where you can really control which categories you want to allow to be purchased on. You can put procedures, policies, and then you allow your end users to buy specifically on these marketplaces for these categories. This is really a change and a shift, I would say, in the collaboration, because then the right parties manage the right areas.
Thanks, Stephanie. That really sounded very interesting. Christophe, what do you see today as the main customer priorities? And do you think that our organizations are really ready for that kind of shift?
Well, Goedele, if you would like, I can give you a small sneak peek, because every year at Deloitte we run a global survey on CPO participations, and we have about 400, 500 CPOs globally responding to that survey. So that really gives us a very good insight into what are they thinking about, what keeps them awake at night, what are their priorities, but also what are they struggling with, I would say. And so if we look at priorities, there's actually 3 that are already highlighted in this most recent 2023 survey. I think the first one was already touched upon by Pierre, the sustainability, ESG, CSR. That is, of course, one of the key topics where procurement needs to play its role. The second one is on operational efficiency, and that can be operational efficiency within the organization itself, but of course also throughout the supply chain, throughout the network. So that's an important driver where procurement can really add value. And then the third one, and that has been top priority for the previous years, is the digital transformation. And so I think those 3, I would say, priorities really link very well to the topic that we're discussing today. Now, if you ask whether they're struggling with the CPOs, I think, and that is probably not new to you, the supply continuity. Because geopolitics, because of COVID-19, other things that are playing in the global market space, CPOs are really lying awake at night. Is my organization going to be able to continue producing? Are they going to be able to continue serving clients because of supply continuity? And I think the major weapon that they're using to fight against the issues of supply continuity is really creating visibility within their supply base and collaborating with their supply base. And so that is exactly what the benefit of a supply network is all about, I would say. Of course, we see somewhat of a range in maturity. We see that very mature organizations, very mature procurement organizations, they have already taken steps. They are already on networks and they're already actively collaborating with suppliers and with their whole network. I think the less mature organizations, there you see a very different story. The CPO survey also addresses that 1 in 2 organizations do not yet have a supplier relationship management solution in place.
Okay.
So as of the point in time that you don't have that in place, of course, then you're still very much inward looking, and then you still need to take a couple of steps in your digital transformation in order to be enabled on a network.
Okay. So, Stephanie, how do companies approach then that kind of digitalization? And do you have any recommendations before they start thinking about that kind of really transformational projects?
Yeah, of course. And I think what's key here, what's important to note is that each client has different goals, has different challenges, depending on the industry, depending on the level of maturity, as Christophe was just mentioning. What we see is that all of our transformation really rely on a business case to start with, a strong business case that really looks at increasing efficiency, compliance, putting in place controls, risk management, automation of invoice processing, right? So these are really the key topics that are in most of the business cases we see at our clients. What we want is really to make a positive impact for our customers, and what we do is really to try to enable visibility, controls around all of these aspects of the business case. The first thing I would say is key to really have internal alignment within the company to really make sure that the goals and objectives are really shared within the company, and that it's very, very clear what needs to be achieved.
Cross business unit within the company, or?
Yeah, I mean, at the sponsor level, okay. I definitely think it's important to have internally an alignment around objectives and what we want to achieve with this transformation. From there, what's important to really also understand for us is the maturity of the organization. Is the organization ready for such change? At which level? We see two different approaches. Some companies will go as a step-by-step approach, putting in place the basics, and then implementing slowly new functionalities, expanding the scope, expanding geographically. And then you have another approach, which is more of a big bang approach, where companies will want to implement a full end-to-end change at the same time across the board. And that really depends on the culture of the company. It depends on the change readiness, internal change readiness, external change readiness as well. So it's really important to keep that in mind. It really varies from a client to another. What's important, I would say, in terms of tips, really to some guidelines I would say that we should keep in mind is keep it simple, move to cloud, stay as standards as you can. Make sure your solutions are integrated. You want to make sure you have these automatic flows of data and processes. And that's really something to keep in mind. Always keep in mind your end user. Make sure you keep your suppliers also in the loop, and not forgetting them is a very, very important thing as well.
I think that's important as well, because when you were talking about stakeholder priorities, there's of course your internal stakeholders, but if you talk about the network, then your suppliers become an important stakeholder as well. And don't expect them to be ready just like that. So you really have to make sure that you convince them that they can have a benefit of becoming part of your network, and that you also help them and take them by the hand step by step to be on that network. And we'll come back to that later again, how you can do that in a practical.
Thank you both for those tips and tricks. I think it makes it much more clearer for the audience. But I'm wondering, is there any discrepancy between the vision to go to that kind of transformation and reality? I mean, do we see some resistance within our customers' prospects?
Yeah, of course. And it can happen, and it will probably happen, that along the way of these journeys, these big programs, there will be some change management efforts required. It's a real change that the organization is going to go through, changing a tool, changing people's ways of working, also collaborating with your suppliers, communicating with suppliers, exchanging information. Things are changing, right? So it's a real change. What's important there is really to start right and to acknowledge that there is a change that will happen. Acknowledge that there may be some resistance along the way, and to set yourself up from the start to set it up right. And so, yeah, indeed, it's important to set it up right, having a change team identified at the beginning of your program, making sure, as I was mentioning before, that your stakeholders are aligned, you're sponsored at the highest level of the company. Talk to the organization in the same manner, with the same voice, that objectives are aligned, that everybody is shifting or moving into the right direction into that change, and internally finding the right people that will be the voice of your program, making sure that you find internally people who want to make this change happen and who want to support this change internally. So this is very, very important. Now, another aspect that is quite key is, again, as Christophe mentioned, the suppliers. not forgetting to keep your suppliers in the loop, making it clear to them that without them, it won't work, right? So not just internally, but also externally. Without suppliers, it will not work. So it's important to keep them informed.
And that external change management towards the suppliers, we actually call that supplier and content enablement. And those are programs that we always try to put as part of our transformation package, I would say, because if you don't look at that, you will miss really a big part of your digital transformation and getting that network economy stimulated. So I think what is important there is that on a central level towards your supply base, you define your strategy. How am I going to make sure that my suppliers will become part of my network or the network that I have chosen to implement? And how do you make sure that once the supplier is there, the content that your suppliers are able to offer you is also included in your solution? And so really centrally, we try to define the strategy, the communication templates, the wave approach, etc. But then we try to locally really execute that, because we want local proximity with the client, with the suppliers, and sometimes we also need language specifics. So the way that you can probably visualize it maybe best is if you build a new supermarket, for instance, and you have the most state-of-the-art, very fancy, nice and cozy supermarket, but there's nothing in that supermarket to buy. Then people will come once, but they will probably not come again, because then you don't have a successful implementation. And that's really how you have to think about it. You build that system. That system is like the shelves in your supermarket, but you have to make sure that suppliers know how to find you, that they deliver their products and their services on time in that network. And that really takes time and effort. You don't have to expect your supplier to be there with the flick of a button. It really takes time. And if you really want to go very far in integrating the ERP of your supplier and your ERP system to gain full benefits of a network, for instance, that can take up to half a year between the first discussions and the full implementation. So you really need that time. And I think from a change management perspective, as we mentioned before as well, getting your stakeholders internally aligned and fully synced is important, because as we mentioned, that enablement team will be addressing your supply base. All of a sudden, that's a new stakeholder group that is addressing your suppliers. You have your IT teams working with the IT teams of the suppliers to make sure that all the connections are being set up. But then when your supplier has a question, he will probably revert back to the buyer who is working with him or her on a day-to-day operational basis. So you also have to make sure that you close the loop with the buyer who is in the day-to-day contact. So that's quite important. And you really have to, I would say, give the what's in it for me to the suppliers as well. It will take them time, but it will also take them a bit of convincing to join you on the network. There are multiple networks. They need to become part of the network that you have joined. And so you really have to show them, okay, there are benefits in faster payment, but also in terms of growth. We will, because you are part of our network, we might grow our business with you, or we might stay more loyal to you as a supplier. So those are also more intangible benefits that get added to the mix. And then lastly, I think it's also important that you decide upon some kind of escalation strategy with the senior management in your company. Like, what if we had expected certain suppliers to become part of our network? We will see certain benefits from it. But if the supplier says, no, we don't want to do that, how, and it is a crucial supplier for you, you cannot just change that supplier. What is your escalation strategy? How will you, I would say, revert back to the supplier on various levels in order to make it happen? So those are, I think, a couple of topics to keep in mind.
Wow, I learned a lot today about the opportunities of the new network economy, but also what I remember is that it's also about collaboration internally, but also externally. Very important to align and sync with our suppliers. And let's not forget about the change management part. So that's what I take away today. Thanks a lot. It was really nice having you here, guys.
With pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Gudrun.
And once again, a big thank you to all of you out there for watching, reading, and listening to us. Be sure to check out the other Inside Tracks by Deloitte. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
You're now one step further on the inside track to agility. Want to know more about the 6 domains that will strengthen your organization? The Belgian Readiness Report is freely available. Be sure to tune in to the next episode of the Inside Track to keep broadening your way forward.